The meeting ended the way most Galactic Council sessions did, with a dozen species squabbling like half-starved rats over a single scrap of food. That was before the human delegate stood up, adjusted his collar, and said, "We're done." The silence that followed was unnatural. It wasn't just quiet. It was void-like, an absence of sound where there should have been noise. Every representative in the chamber turned toward Ambassador Kovat, the Terran Union's appointed diplomat. He gave them the kind of look a man gives a dog that's just bitten his hand for the last time. "I want to be perfectly clear about this," Kovat continued, his voice measured, controlled. "The Terran Union will no longer participate in this council. Effective immediately, we withdraw all economic, military and technological support from the Galactic Compact. We wish you the best of luck." The declaration rippled through the gathered representatives, disbelief evident on their faces. The reptilian Vatri delegate let out a hissing chuckle. "A human joke, surely." "No joke," Kovat said. "It's a reality you'll have to live with. We're done being taken for granted. We're done cleaning up your messes. We're done fighting wars on your behalf while you debate moral implications in safety." "Preposterous!" the Saracen High Speaker spat, his elongated form shifting uncomfortably. "Humanity has obligations." Kovat tapped a finger against his temple, as if considering. "No, I don't recall signing a contract that says we're obligated to die for you. You had your chance to treat us as equals. You squandered it. We're leaving." The assembled delegates burst into a flurry of arguments, each species speaking over the other in a chaotic storm of disbelief, outrage, and panicked pleading. The humans had never spoken in such absolute terms before. The room stank of fear. The Kari Admiral's mandibles clicked furiously. "You cannot do this. Without human logistical support, defense coordination will collapse." Kovat finished for him. "Yes, it will. Because you've all built a system where you rely on us, but refuse to acknowledge it. So let's see how you function without the ones you so often dismiss." A representative of the Uli Confederacy rose, his translucent skin pulsing in agitation. "You are condemning billions to suffering." "No," Kovat corrected, "we're refusing to suffer for you." He turned and strode toward the exit. The council chamber buzzed with activity, some shouting, others whispering into communication devices. Kovat didn't look back. Within hours, every human ship stationed at Galactic Council bases began withdrawal procedures. Entire fleets vanished from their patrol routes, leaving defense platforms and stations exposed. Research outposts, once staffed with human scientists, went dark. The Galactic Compact's trade lanes, long kept secure by human-led patrols, were now open hunting grounds for pirates and opportunists. The first major catastrophe hit within a week. The Cath Dominion, a species known for their ruthless opportunism, launched an offensive on 3 border worlds belonging to the Saracen High Dominion. With no human-led task force to intercept them, their warships tore through defences like wet paper. Cities burned under orbital bombardment. The High Speaker sent urgent distress calls to the Council. No one answered. The Vatri, sensing weakness, pulled their own fleets inward, abandoning their commitment to the so-called Mutual Defence Pact. The Uari, dependent on human-managed supply chains, found themselves unable to sustain interstellar trade routes. Food shortages sparked riots on dozens of colonies. The Council's great bureaucratic machine, so reliant on human mediation and efficiency, stalled like a ship with a broken engine. The humans, meanwhile, did not wait for the universe to come knocking on their door. They fortified their own borders, strengthened trade with independent powers, and built an economic network that thrived in ways the Council had never envisioned. They didn't just leave, they moved on. Without human interference, old grudges reignited. The Galactic Compact, once a fragile balancing act held together by human diplomats, became a battleground for competing factions. Pirate fleets, long suppressed by human anti-piracy operations, grew bolder. Trade collapsed in entire sectors as skirmishes turned into full-scale conflicts. The Compact had assumed that humanity's absence would be a temporary inconvenience. Instead, it became a disaster. "Maybe they'll come crawling back," some hopeful council members whispered in private chambers. "Maybe they'll see reason." They didn't. Humanity had spent too long playing janitor, strategist, and soldier for an ungrateful galaxy. Now, the galaxy would learn what it meant to be truly alone. Panic spread across the Galactic Compact like wildfire. Emergency sessions were called and desperate messages were sent to the Terran Union. All of them were ignored. Every attempt to establish contact was met with automated responses or outright silence. Some species tried to downplay the situation, convinced that humanity would eventually return out of some misplaced sense of duty. Others, the more pragmatic ones, saw the writing on the wall. Within a month, the first major economic collapse hit. The Wari Confederacy, having relied on human logistical oversight for their extensive trade networks, found their supply lines disintegrating. Their attempts to replicate human efficiency fell apart due to the sheer complexity of managing multi-system operations without the countless optimizations humans had introduced over the years. Food shortages turned into full-scale riots, and several colonies declared independence, preferring to take their chances alone rather than depend on an administration that could no longer feed them. The Sakian High Dominion, still reeling from the Karath assault, attempted to mobilize its forces for a counterattack. Without human tactical advisors, their fleet coordination was a mess of conflicting orders and outdated strategies. The Karath, emboldened by their initial success, pushed deeper, capturing key Sakian systems and dismantling entire planetary defences with ease. The High Speaker made a last-ditch effort to rally support from the Council, but all he received were vague assurances and political posturing. The old power structures were crumbling and everyone knew it. The Kari, once staunch allies of the humans, realized that their survival depended on adaptation. While others begged for aid, the Kari initiative focused on salvaging what it could from the chaos. They dispatched envoys to independent human colonies, hoping to negotiate trade agreements, technology transfers, anything that would ensure they didn't fall victim to the same fate as the others. Their delegation was met with skepticism. Humanity had no interest in returning to the old ways, but they were willing to engage on their terms. For the first time in history, the galaxy saw what a human-led economic empire could look like: efficient, ruthless, and self-sufficient. Meanwhile, the Council itself fractured under the weight of its own incompetence. Old rivalries resurfaced, long-suppressed disputes reignited, and without humans to act as intermediaries, diplomatic channels collapsed. The Vatri, once firm supporters of unity, withdrew their forces from joint operations, choosing instead to fortify their own territories. The Uli declared a state of martial law across their remaining systems, and the Sakians fell into full-scale civil war as different factions blamed each other for their losses. The Compact, in every meaningful sense, was dead. On the outskirts of human space, a delegation of desperate council members arrived at the border of the Terran Union, requesting an audience. They were met not by a diplomat, but by an automated transmission. "This is Terran space. You are not authorized to enter. Turn back." They pleaded, begged, sent frantic messages detailing the galaxy's worsening condition. No response. Some speculated that humanity had gone into full isolation. Others feared that they were preparing something far worse. Then, the first human patrol fleet was spotted moving through disputed territories, but not as a peacekeeping force. This time, they weren't acting under the Council's authority. They had their own agenda, and the galaxy could do nothing but watch. The first recorded human military action outside their own borders occurred 68 days after their departure from the Galactic Compact. A fleet of Terran warships entered the disputed Zenda corridor, a system long fought over by rival factions. What made this operation different from past Council interventions was the lack of pretense. There was no formal declaration, no diplomatic warnings. Just a single transmission sent moments before the first orbital bombardment began. The Terran Union recognizes no authority over this region but its own. Withdraw immediately. The two warring factions, caught in the middle of their latest skirmish, barely had time to react. Human ships cut through their formations with precise, methodical efficiency. The engagement lasted 20 minutes. When the dust settled, one side had been obliterated, the other left scattered and broken. No occupation followed. No demands were made. The human fleet left the system as quickly as it arrived, leaving only silence and wreckage in its wake. This single event sent shockwaves through the fractured compact. Humanity was not only capable of acting without oversight, it was now enforcing its own will without seeking permission. The realization set in quickly. The era of human restraint was over. In response, the Council convened an emergency session, the third of its kind since humanity's departure. As before, it devolved into chaos. Accusations flew, some claiming that humanity had planned this all along, others arguing that continued isolation was the only solution. The Kari Initiative, the only species that had successfully maintained trade relations with the humans, urged the Council to reconsider its stance. If we continue down this path, we will be speaking about humanity as an external power, not a former ally. We must adapt. The Sakian delegation, still crippled by their internal conflicts, dismissed the warning. They are already treating us as something lesser. Look at what they did in Zenda. That wasn't enforcement. That was extermination. Perhaps, a Vatri representative mused, or perhaps it was a demonstration. Their speculation turned into certainty when the next strike came, this time against the notorious pirate faction operating along the old human trade routes. The pirate lords had once thrived under the Compact's inability to maintain order, preying on vulnerable merchant vessels and border colonies. With humanity gone, they had grown bolder, striking at former human-aligned worlds. They assumed, as many did, that humans no longer cared what happened beyond their borders. They were wrong. An entire flotilla of pirate warships disappeared overnight. What little footage remained from scattered distress signals showed the same pattern as before. No negotiations, no attempts at capture, just swift, brutal elimination. Unlike previous conflicts, the humans made no effort to salvage technology or seize resources. It was not conquest. It was eradication. The message was clear. Humanity would no longer tolerate disorder, and they would no longer play by the rules the Compact had once set for them. The Kargath Dominion, having carved out large portions of Sakian space, took the warning seriously. They immediately ceased further expansion and redirected their forces inward, fortifying their holdings. Though outwardly defiant, their leaders held secret meetings to discuss what many feared: how long before human fleets turned their attention to them. For the first time in centuries, the Compact species had no idea what humanity wanted. In the past, they had been predictable, diplomatic, patient, willing to negotiate. Now they were something else entirely, and that terrified the galaxy far more than their absence ever had. The galaxy waited for humanity's next move, and the silence was deafening. Fear gripped the Galactic Compact, paranoia sinking deep into the hearts of its leaders. Every military strategist, every intelligence officer, and every surviving diplomat spent sleepless cycles trying to anticipate what the Terran Union would do next. Would they expand? Would they dismantle the remaining power structures of the Compact? Or would they simply watch as everything fell apart? They received their answer when human ships arrived at the heart of the Compact itself. Galactic Council Station, the seat of governance that once dictated policy across 1,000 worlds. A fleet of Terran warships, sleek and imposing, took formation around the station, broadcasting a single message: the Terran Union requests an audience. There was no demand, no threat, just a statement. But for the Council, the weight of those words was heavier than any ultimatum. For the first time since humanity's departure, representatives of the remaining powers sat face to face with the humans. Ambassador Kovac, who had once walked out of the chamber with measured disdain, now stood before them again, calm and composed. His presence alone was enough to make some of the gathered officials shift uncomfortably. "We are not here to negotiate re-entry," Kovac began, his voice firm, "nor are we here to wage war. The compact is in disarray, but it is not humanity's concern to mend it. We did not come to reclaim our seat." A murmur rippled through the chamber. If they weren't here to return, then what was their goal? Kovac continued, "You have all seen what has happened in our absence. The systems you govern have fractured, trade has collapsed, and old enemies have resurfaced. We made it clear when we left that we were done being your caretakers, and yet we see our absence has only led to chaos." The Sakian High Speaker, his form thin and frail from the endless conflicts his people had endured, spoke cautiously. What is it that you propose, then?" Kovac gestured to the gathered representatives. "The compact as it stands is dead. Your systems are failing. Your armies are leaderless. Your diplomacy is meaningless without an enforcer. What I propose is simple: dissolution. The compact ends today." The room exploded in protests. Some shouted in outrage, others in desperation. The compact had existed for centuries, an institution meant to unite species in common cause. To dissolve it outright was unthinkable. "You cannot decide this alone," one official hissed. "The compact has stood longer than humanity's place among the stars. We will rebuild. We will—" "You will fall," Kovac interrupted. "With or without us, the compact has collapsed. You all know it. We are offering you something else. Order." The chamber fell into silence once more. Kovac continued, "A new structure, one that does not pretend to be a democracy when it is merely an arena for weak arguments, one that does not claim to value peace when it relies on humanity to clean up its wars, one that does not promise prosperity while demanding sacrifices it will never acknowledge. We do not need the compact, and you do not need its illusions, but you do need stability, and we are offering that." The meaning behind his words was clear. The Terran Union was not asking for permission. They were stating a reality. Some of the gathered representatives understood this immediately. The Kari Initiative, which had managed to maintain some semblance of order by aligning itself with human trade, saw opportunity in this. Their envoy, a seasoned admiral, spoke with measured curiosity. "And what does this stability look like?" Kovac met his gaze. "A new order, built on merit, on strength, on efficiency. We will not rule you. We will not govern your planets or dictate your policies. But we will not tolerate weakness. Systems that wish to function will do so under the reality that there will be consequences for failure. Those that descend into chaos will not be given second chances." A new kind of fear took hold of the room, one not of destruction, but of survival. "You expect us to surrender our sovereignty?" the Wari representative asked, voice trembling. "No," Kovac answered. "I expect you to prove you deserve to keep it. The era of blind cooperation is over. Stand on your own feet or fall, knowing that no one will catch you." The compact did not officially vote to dissolve itself. It simply ceased to function. Worlds that refused to accept reality crumbled under their own incompetence. Others, like the Kari, thrived by adapting to the new order humanity had imposed. The galactic stage did not fall into barbarism. nor was it consumed by war. It simply reorganized, no longer built upon the illusion of unity, but upon the knowledge that survival was no longer a right. It was something that had to be earned. And humanity, at last, was no longer the galaxy's caretaker. They had become something else entirely.